This podcast is brought to you by North Carolina's electric cooperatives.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
March wins and March Madness are facts of life here in the Tar Heel State, but this week we're not talking about basketball, but state budgets. On Wednesday, Governor Cooper submitted his proposed budget recommendations to the legislature, and our panel's going to help us work through what might get passed and what might get ignored. We also want to discuss the ruling by a Superior Court judge that the legislative process used to put the voter ID and income tax cap amendments on our ballot last November was unconstitutional. And you can be sure we won't sign off until we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Speaking of the panel, they include former Supreme Court Justice Bob Orr, John Hood, syndicated columnist and author, Chris Fitzsimon, director of the Newsroom, and Beavon Gravely, political analyst and consultant. We begin our uninterrupted debate after these brief messages from our underwriters.
They're up before dawn and work late into the night. They believe in hard work, family, and doing the right thing. They stand up for their communities when others walk away. They're good people who just want a fair shake. They are farmers. At North Carolina Farm Bureau, we are proud to stand with our farmers.
Today's tools make you a real DIYer, and as a member of an electric cooperative, you have lots of valuable tools to help you do it yourself in controlling your home energy use and budget, leaving you free to be Dad.
Finding a North Carolina solution for covering the uninsured will reduce all our health care costs and lead to a healthier North Carolina. Let's find a solution for covering the uninsured. Visit careforcarolina.com.
Production underwriting provided by the North Carolina Academy of Family Physicians. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
Let's get started. Part of the rhythm of the budget dance that takes place every 2 years is for the sitting governor to present his or her budget proposals to the legislature. Governor Roy Cooper did that on Wednesday, and we want our panel to discuss his proposals. Beavon, I want to start with you. Another truism in state government is that the governor proposes and the legislature disposes. In fact, in more instances than not, the budget the governor submits to the legislature is little more than a starting point. Now, some believe Governor Cooper might have more influence this year because his veto can't be automatically overridden. What do you think?
Well, I think they're not going to be able to dispose of it quite as easily as they have in the past few sessions that we've seen. The governor proposed a $25.2 billion budget with increased spending that in 5 years will be $4.1 billion, which is a 20% increase in spending. The governor telegraphed what he wanted to put in the budget, his priorities, including increase of teacher pay, state bond, as well as Medicaid expansion. But there's going to have to be a lot more attention paid to what he sent over.
Interesting. In fact, the Republican response to this, Bob, was that this was more of a political budget, political document than it really was a budget, that he was just rehashing and revamping all of his talking points that he had been using throughout the course of the year. Was this a realistic reaction from Republicans? Is it going to be another doorstop as it has been in past years?
Well, I think it'll be more than that. It's certainly accurate in the sense that it reflects Governor Cooper's political wishes and ambitions for the state, but it gives him a dollar negotiating point to start with when they get into the legislature and actually start putting the budget together. So I don't think it's unrealistic. It would have been the same regardless of whether it had been Governor McCrory or Governor Purdue.
Oh, yeah. It's always been the same thing, whatever the governor. But Governor Cooper says, okay, I know they're not going to bite on all of these things, but I think maybe some of them might be acceptable to the
I hope some of them are acceptable. Like, I think we need to spend money on rape kits that have been stored forever, and we don't know. We have people walking around North Carolina who committed a horrible, heinous crime. I mean, there's a lot of things in the budget I hope that aren't controversial. There are things that are controversial. He did put his priorities in the budget. That's what you're supposed to do. There are actually people on the left who were disappointed he didn't go further and didn't talk about maybe bringing back some of the tax cuts on, or a little bit of on higher earners, or rescinding part of the corporate tax cut to pay for more priorities for what they think is a structural deficit. I think this is sort of a moderate budget. The thing that I was most disappointed in is everybody talks about the call for civility. Governor Cooper in his State of the State speech, I thought, wasn't partisan. I think his budget address, or at least his press conference, wasn't that partisan. And the reaction, not just from Phil Berger, but from folks down the line, Harry Brown, Kathy Harrington, other people in the Senate, was over the top. Like, you thought he would have proposed a 50% tax increase. That the rhetoric, and it's fine if they think that, but you think the beginning, and that's what advocates are supposed to do in interest groups, not sitting members of the legislature. Why can't we have a constructive dialogue saying the governor has different priorities? We'll look at it. We want to do X or Y.
Yeah, everything has to be partisan.
Absolutely, over the top, I thought.
John, okay, so he's proposed $25.2 billion. Last year was 23.9, so it's a $1 billion increase.
In the general fund budget, which is not the full budget, as we know.
Yeah.
Full budget's way over $50 billion.
The governor says, hey, I deliberately did this so that even though there's some increased spending in some areas, it's not going to raise taxes.
Well, there are some tax increases. There are tax increases in there. They're not general fund, general applicable tax increases, but there are large tax increase on the plans that are going to be participating in the Medicaid managed care, for example, which can talk about hundreds of millions of dollars in higher taxes in that area, but it doesn't have general applicability. But yeah, I think it's true that there were people on the left who were really disappointed this didn't have a large tax increase, a walk back of the last several years. The governor has got to face the voters next year, and whatever people think about how much money we have and whether we should have cut taxes, the voters do not think North Carolinians are undertaxed. And if the governor had come in with what perhaps he would have, in his heart of hearts, wanted to do, that would have been politically disastrous, because not just because the Republicans wouldn't have done it, but because it would have been unpopular in the general public. So the real fight is about Medicaid expansion, the governor's plan to get rid of vouchers, and the debt. Yeah. And the debt may be the biggest one of all, because I think Medicaid expansion is already running out of gas, but the other two are significant fights. Those are the fights he chose to pick.
Let's pick some of this apart. Particularly want to get into the school bond referendum. We've been hearing talk from the House and the Senate about $1.9 billion for school construction funding. The question was, would it be voted or non-voted debt? Governor came out and said he wanted $3.9 billion, which was far greater than either the House or the Senate had. But here's what he wants: $2 billion for schools, $500 million for community colleges, $500 million for the universities. Then he wants another $800 million for water and sewer infrastructure, and $100 million for the Museum of History and the zoo. How's that going to land over there?
Well, one thing I want to go back to real fast is the fact that some Democrats were not very pleased at how far this went. They wanted it to go a little further. I'm looking at this budget, and I think it's gone pretty far. I mean, that's a great example of just asking for a lot. And I think that some of it is just not gonna sit well, and some of it will be brushed over.
Well, let's pick that apart a little bit. Okay, so you got the same amount of money essentially for school building, school constructions. He's got $500 million for community colleges, $500 million for universities. Frankly, don't you think that is added in there sort of as spices to make the voters of North Carolina want to approve this thing?
Oh, I don't know. I think the voters would be happy to vote for school construction.
Well, there's no question about the $800 million for water and sewer, is there?
Right. Well, no, but we just had hurricanes and one of the things we found out is that a lot of municipal water systems are completely out of date and having problems and polluting the environment when there's big storms. So I think part of the consensus ought to be for that we have to do something. Maybe this isn't the way to do it, but we need a massive infusion of money into the local infrastructure. The other thing is, it was the year 2000, I think, right? It was a $3 billion bond issue, which passed significantly. That's a long time ago, so the amount shouldn't scare people. We could debate that what should be in it. Interest rates are still low. if we do this on a pay-as-you-go basis, these things would take 20 or 30 years to build.
Well, John, let's get back to a point that you made about debt. Charlie Peruzzi, who is the governor's budget director and formerly had been over at the university and so forth like that, said we have capacity for $10 billion more debt. So 3.9 is not pushing the limit so far as our debt capacity is concerned. You said this was an issue. Tell me why, and whether you agree with what Charlie Peruzzi was saying.
There was a committee of officials that he pitched this idea to last month, and they voted him down 6-3. Really? His argument was,
what was the committee?
Well, the one that the state treasurer sets up for the debt affordability.
Okay.
And so the debt affordability argument that most of the people on that committee concluded that we have about $2 billion of debt, debt capacity, if we start taking seriously the unfunded liability for the health plan. That we have to start paying that off. We have to start saving money for that. Peruzzi said, I care about that, but this is more important. We can do 10. So if we did, he actually said 6 initially, so they went down to 4. They think that's a compromise. That is a compromise if you do not believe that we have tens of billions of dollars of unfunded liabilities. Since we do, and that is a real debt, then I think that the governor's proposal is simply way excessive.
And this has really been a sticky wicket from the standpoint of it's an unfunded liability, and yes, we owe it, but it hasn't been on the state's balance sheets.
That's correct, and there has been, actually last year they started putting money aside.
You and I would have to have it on our balance sheets if we went to the bank to borrow money. Bob, let's talk about the Medicaid expansion. Governor has been very, very adamant about this. He says there are 500,000 people who could be eligible for Medicaid who aren't now receiving it, and that this would actually save the state money from the vantage point that the feds would be picking up more cost, and that the hospitals have agreed to also pick up a large part of the cost. Net effect, state offers better health care and at savings. That's a pretty convincing argument, is it not? Why is the legislature bucking this?
Well, I think it's the philosophical concept of expanding Medicaid. And I would be the first to say, I don't understand Medicaid. What I do know, though, is that I think Governor Cooper is going to double down on the Medicaid expansion. I think that maybe is the single most important issue to him.
So some of this other stuff may be negotiating points.
No question.
This is the veto. In other words, if he doesn't get Medicaid expansion in some form or fashion, we might see the veto.
Well, and what he's put out, though, is that this helps rural hospitals. So he's pitching it in a broader context, both from a health care perspective and, as I read it, sort of an economic development perspective. That this is going to be good for the state, but I think this is his priority.
Anna Beavon, you come from a family of educators. I'm sure they had to be satisfied with the fact that the governor is proposing a 9% pay increase over the next 2 years, it's less. No teacher would get less than 3%. We already know
every teacher loves a raise. Everybody loves a raise. Yeah. And so that's something that will not change.
Hot dogs, apple pie, motherhood, and pay raises.
Absolutely. But the question that I have is, if we continue to give teachers raises, will there ever be a point where there's enough? Because if we continue to give them raises, this is right on the heels of them getting a 9.2% pay increase over the last 2 years. And so I just want to know, and I'm curious to find out if there's going to be a point where they're like, okay, I feel like that's
the report was released that the average teacher pay is $54,000 a year this past week. So you give them 4.5% raise this year and 4.5% next year. We keep inching closer to the national average.
Right, and isn't that something that's our goal, to be average? That's our standard somehow, that we want to be the average state in how we pay teachers. We're 4th in the Southeast. We're not even #1 in our region, so I think we have a ways to go.
And if we change, then if we work toward the national average, we're in fact changing the average. So we'll be chasing it for a while.
It is important to note that this is not the area. We have had big partisan fights between the governor and the legislature in past years about teacher pay, and there will be differences of opinion. I don't actually think the actual budget the legislature enacts will be dramatically lower in the teacher pay number.
Yeah.
Now the composition will be different.
Yeah, because we've been hearing 4%, something along those lines.
Yeah, that's not that different from what happened the last 2 years. I think the big fights are Medicaid expansion, the debt load, and the opportunity scholarship
Well,
cut,
let's
which
talk
Republicans
about that.
are not going to go along
Let's
with.
talk about that. That has just been an area in which our legislature is just full throttle. In fact, they're increasing every year the amount of money given to the opportunity scholarships. It's been sticking in the craw of public school supporters for many, many years.
This provision is a gift to the North Carolina Association of Educators for their loyal service, and it will not pass the legislature, in my view. In fact, there are many Democrats as well as Republicans who are not going to settle for that.
But there are a lot of Democrats that want accountability in this program, and I have said on here many times before, we don't know how that money is spent. We have schools that are literally teaching kids things that are against scientific reality, like dinosaurs and humans coexist at the same time. Your tax dollars, millions of it, is paying to teach kids that. There has to be some accountability at these schools.
I couldn't agree more. And I was in on the litigation. I still think the vouchers are unconstitutional, even though a majority of the Supreme Court didn't agree.
And that fight may not be finished yet. The governor keeps talking about wanting to offer free community college tuition for students in North Carolina. The legislature has just ignored this in times past. Can he make any traction with that this year? Is that another negotiating point for him?
I don't think you'll have any traction with that. The whole concept of free school, I think, will not sit well in the greater General Assembly.
The problem here, Tom, is that community college costs are very low.
Yeah.
If you are of low income, you can take it to virtually zero. So while it sounds like you're doing a great thing for people who have economic challenges, the only real beneficiaries of this would be fairly well-off people who have their kids at community colleges. It's just not a high priority in my view.
Two other points real quick. The first one is that state employees get a 1.5% pay increase under this per year for the next 2 years, or $500, whichever is larger. Is that going to be satisfactory, Chris?
Well, I don't think so, because, you know, again, as I've said on this program before, we have somehow gotten into the place where 2% is considered a giant raise for state employees, and now we're back to 1.5%. I still think the state workforce is underpaid. It makes it difficult to attract people, but the political reality is it's much more popular to give raises to teachers. It's much more popular to do other things. And I think that's,
from a standpoint of will it fly through the legislature, I think is
right. I think that's. I hope that they'll at least do that.
All right, Bob, the governor says, hey, none of this is going to cause a tax increase. In fact, we're projected to have a surplus, and he's proposing putting $200 million a year back into the rainy day fund for the next 2 years. Stewardship issue? Is it enough?
Probably not. I think the kind of natural disasters North Carolina has experienced is a strong rationale for a big rainy day fund, because
I want to go back to the original question, though, AB. So what's the legislature going to have to be willing to give up out of his budget proposals, or accept out of his budget proposals in order to prevent a veto? Any idea?
Well, I think we've touched on a lot of it. Medicaid expansion is definitely going to be one that I think the governor is going to really stick to and hold to, as well as the Opportunity Scholarship Grant is going to be an issue.
Well, let's switch gears. The story landed like a bombshell. The headline said that a Wake County Superior Court judge had declared the voter ID and tax cap constitutional amendments approved last November to be unconstitutional. Reaction was immediate, largely negative. How could one judge make such a declaration, people asked, when the voters of our state had approved these amendments? The judge further refused a stay of his ruling, and the Republican legislative leadership proclaimed this was yet another example of liberal judges legislating from the bench. But is that what really happened? We want to ask an expert on constitutional law, former Supreme Court Justice Bob Orr. Bob, you wrote an op-ed piece saying that Judge Collins wasn't some crazy, wild-eyed liberal judge. And in further discussions, you went on to say he didn't declare the voter ID or the tax cap amendments unconstitutional. Explain what you meant.
Well, let's start with the foundation of Judge Collins' ruling, and that was a decision by the federal courts, affirmed by the United States Supreme Court, that the districts in question were racially gerrymandered and were unconstitutional. This is not some ruling that Judge Collins pulled out of the air. This is the federal courts and the U.S. Supreme Court. And so then the question came before Judge Collins in this litigation, well, what's the effect of the fact that these districts are unconstitutionally constituted? And there were several provisions in the North Carolina Constitution dealing with constitutional amendments that are at the heart of the decision. And he simply said, in a limited decision, that the proposal of constitutional amendments by a legislature that has been deemed by the federal courts unconstitutionally constituted cannot stand. And so it was in many ways a dramatic decision, one that caught a lot of folks by surprise, but it
You supported his ruling, essentially.
Well, I mean, candidly, I haven't researched the issue. I do think there is a legitimate argument to be made. One of the provisions in the amendment process in the North Carolina Constitution is that it has to comply with federal law and the U.S. Constitution, and yet you have a decision, you know, by the federal courts saying that the legislature that proposed the amendments and submitted them is unconstitutionally constituted.
So in layman's terms, are these two amendments constitutional or not?
At this point, no. They have been stricken as.
The appeals court stayed.
Yeah, they stayed that.
So they're currently not unconstitutional.
John, you wrote an op-ed piece refuting the good justice
no,
here.
I didn't say anything about that.
I want some point-counterpoint going on here.
I didn't say anything about that. I'm a reporter. I consult people with law degrees. And Bob, I'm pretty sure you're way out on a limb here. Most Democrat and Republican lawyers have looked at this, think this decision is not just incorrect, but preposterously reasoned. And here's the reason. There isn't very much precedent about this, but there is at least one case, which the judge actually cited out of Tennessee, where someone claimed, I'm on death row, but the capital punishment statute was enacted by an illegally constituted Tennessee legislature, therefore I shouldn't be on death row. And the federal courts did deal with this issue, and what they said is, you're going to have disputes about redistricting. You can't go back and negate issues that were enacted by a legislature that was subsequently found to be out of compliance because of the chaos and confusion and some other standards. And specifically, they said you can't go in and make exceptions and say, well, maybe most laws should stand, but some should not stand. They said no. That is a very persuasive argument.
Chris, before these two go to blows, where are we here?
Well, it stayed, and so it's going to be reviewed and go through the normal appellate process. I mean, this is what the courts are for. And so all the whole alarm, even if you disagree with the decision, the alarm that, you know, we have appellate level judges and justices who are supposed to look at all these things. This is what courts are supposed to do, is interpret the Constitution. Judges do it. Appellate court judges do it. So I think we should calm down with the criticism of the whole.
But this takes a while to go through the courts, and we're supposed to be having primary elections a year from now.
We're supposed to have new districts.
And voter ID, well, that's true. Voter ID is going to be one of the things that's supposed to be in play when we have. Just put this whole thing at, we're going to have to postpone voter ID, you think?
I think that that's definitely on the table of things that we're going to have to consider. And I think this justice goes...
if appellate judges uphold this decision, there will be a political disaster for them.
Justice, or you get the last argument here before we go.
And that's fundamentally wrong. If I don't care whether they're Democrats or Republicans, if they make the right decision, there shouldn't be political consequences. It's the threatening of judges, frankly, that prompted me to write the op-ed in support of Judge Collins.
Bob. They're elected. The voters will respond negatively to being told they can't amend their own Constitution.
That's not what the ruling says, and I don't think that's what...
I'm going to let you two guys take this outside, and in the meantime, we're going to switch. And Chris, I'm going to ask you to tell us something we don't know.
Well, we just talked about the possibility of Medicaid expansion. I actually think that chances of that were dealt a blow by the fact that Representative Greg Murphy is now running for Congress. He's a physician. He was one of the people who had said publicly at several events he thought maybe this is the time. Now he's got to run to try to be very conservative.
Well, he can still run and stay in the legislature.
But he's got to run as a very conservative person in a Republican primary. He won't be as likely to play that role.
All right, Anna Bevan, tell us something we don't know.
Changing topics quickly, in a recent one-poll survey of millennials and boomers on their thoughts on buying a house, 47% of millennials believe that it's much harder to buy a home now than it was 30 years ago.
Interesting. Bob Orr, tell us something we don't know.
On April 16th, there will be a case argued at the United States Supreme Court involving the North Carolina Department of Revenue. And it was a case that the revenue lost at all levels, and the Supreme Court took the case.
Interesting. And do we know anyone who's going to be one of the people arguing this?
I do know a few of the people.
John Hood, tell us something we don't know.
Another case that just been decided by the appeals court, really important unanimous decision that rejected the notion that the North Carolina cannot adjust the state employee retirement health plan. That's we just talked about it earlier. The unfunded liability is gigantic. If the court had gone the other way, we would have talked about hundreds of millions of dollars of additional expense.
I've got one real quick. Sometimes business gets a bad rap. We read the story this past week about Jetta Gillian, who owns a State Farmers Market restaurant, took 50 employees and their families to Disney World. All expenses paid, shut the restaurant down. I think that's a wonderful story. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, sign up for our free weekly email newsletter, give your feedback, and read my weekly column. Visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook, and join us next week when we'll have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
They're up before dawn and work late into the night. They believe in hard work, family, and doing the right thing. They stand up for their communities when others walk away. They're good people who just want a fair shake. They are farmers. At North Carolina Farm Bureau, we are proud to stand with our farmers.
Today's tools make you a real DIYer, and as a member of an electric cooperative, you have lots of valuable tools to help you do it yourself in controlling your home energy use and budget, leaving you free to be Dad.
Finding a North Carolina solution for covering the uninsured will reduce all our health care costs and lead to a healthier North Carolina. Let's find a solution for covering the uninsured. Visit careforcarolina.com.
Production underwriting provided by the North Carolina Academy of Family Physicians. Family Physicians, your trusted health care advisor for life.
North Carolina Channel is made possible by the financial contributions of viewers like you who support the UNC TV network.